Hi everyone, this is Steve with XRM Toolkit. For today's video, I wanted to demonstrate how to link your existing Visual Studio solution with XRM Toolkit. I have Visual Studio open, and I've already downloaded and installed the XRM Toolkit extension. If you don't have the extension installed, you'll want to go to xrmtoolkit.com, where you can download and install it for a free 30-day trial. I have an existing solution already open that contains several projects. A project containing some web resources, another project with some plugins in it, another project that just contains my proxy classes, and finally a project with some SSRS reports in it. To start the linking process, right-click on the solution node and find the D365 menu. The only item available is the link to a D365 organization, which I'll go ahead and select. This opens a wizard which will help you link to your D365 organization. Type your organization URL and then tab to the XRM Toolkit display name. This is the text that XRM Toolkit will use in the menu items as well as the connection dialog when you go to log on to this organization again. You'll notice that there are several different options for how to authenticate. I'm going to use the D365 online option as this is the one that will allow me to connect to my test instance. Simply enter in the username and password and we're all set. Clicking the Next button will attempt to make a connection to your instance. If all is successful, then you'll be able to select the active solution. What you're doing here is selecting the solution that you're currently working on in your Dynamics 365 environment. This is used by XRM Toolkit to filter which assets to display when downloading them, as well as what solution to push to when you create new assets. If you don't have a particular solution that you're working with, then you can go ahead and select the default solution. This can always be changed later, so you don't need to worry about it too much here. I've got a demo solution already set up, and so that's the one I'm going to use here. The next page allows you to configure the default settings that will be used by XRM Toolkit for this organization. The defaults for these settings actually come from the global settings, which you can change by clicking on the link here. I've generated my proxy classes previously using the CRM SVC util executable, and so I'd like to be able to make sure that XRM Toolkit will continue to generate them in the same manner. So let's make a couple of changes here. First, I need to change the proxy class generation method from XRM Toolkit to CRM SVC util. I'm going to go ahead and leave the naming method set to the default. I've previously generated these proxy classes using the logical name, and so I'll change the naming convention to reflect that. Now, the way that I currently have my project set up is I have all the proxy classes in the root of my project, and so I'll need to change the directories here. I'm going to remove the folder paths from both the proxy class path and the proxy enum path. I'm going to unselect the use strong types for one-to-many relationships and leave the generate proxy enums in separate classes unselected. That should get our proxy classes generating correctly now. Let's take a look at the File Paths tab. The only things I currently have in my Assets project are web resources, and I do have them all in the root of the project, and so I'm going to remove all the web subfolders. With everything configured according to my current setup, I'm going to go ahead and click on the Finish button. My solution is now linked to my Dynamics 365 organization, and you can tell this because I have several new menu items at the solution level. However, if I go to try to publish any of my web resources, when I look for the D365 menu, nothing appears. This is because even though my solution is linked, none of the items in the projects are linked yet. I can start the linking process by going to either the project or solution node and selecting the Link Items menu. I'm going to go to the solution since none of my items are linked yet. This opens a new window that begins first by searching Dynamics 365 for asset types that it can link to. It then analyzes each project and each file to try and find a match in Dynamics 365. Once complete, you can review each item to see if it was able to find an asset in Dynamics 365 to link to. You'll notice that each of the items is grouped by the project and then sorted alphabetically. The first column is the name of the item in Visual Studio. If it found something to link to, then the name of the Dynamics 365 asset will appear in the second column. The third column displays the type of file that it was able to identify. And then finally, in the fourth column is the action to perform. Any items that it was able to find will default to an action of link to existing item in D365. Items that it was unable to find a link for will display as unable to link, no match found in D365, which it looks like there is one file that it wasn't able to link. If for whatever reason you decide that XRM Toolkit should not link to a file, you can change the action column to no action. For demo purposes, I'll go ahead and change one of these to no action. One thing I'd like to point out is that XRM Toolkit was able to determine that one of the projects is a plugin project with a corresponding assembly already published in Dynamics 365. If we take a look at the xrmtoolkit.demo.plugins project row, we can see that the project file has a type of plugin assembly configuration. This means that upon linking this project, we'll be able to use the Build and Publish menu along with all of the other features for a plugin assembly project. Okay, let's go ahead and click on the Link Items button. Now that most of our items are linked, we get all of the XRM Toolkit options for those files. As you can see for our ace.html file here, we can now publish the item, edit the D365 properties, compare our local item to what is published in D365, download the item from D365, which will overwrite whatever we have locally, and finally we can remove the link to the file if we want to. If we go to our plugins project, we now have the Build and Publish option available, along with several other items. One thing to note is that we may need to do some additional configuration if this plugin project uses IL merge. You can do this by going to the Edit Project Settings menu. Simply check the Use IL merge option and then configure any additional settings. The default options work for me in this case, and it already has the referenced project selected, and so I'm going to hit the Save Project Settings button. Now, whenever I use the Build and Publish option, XRM Toolkit will build the project, execute IL merge, and then upload the new assembly to my organization. Now, if you recall during the linking process, there was a file that XRM Toolkit was not able to find a link for. If we go to that file and right-click on it, a D365 menu appears with a single item. Let's go ahead and select the Link menu item. This brings up a wizard that will guide you through the process of either creating a new resource in D365 or to link to an existing item. This is a new resource that I haven't deployed yet, and so I'll go ahead and leave the option selected to create a new item and then click the Next button. On the next page, we have the ability to modify the properties of the item before publishing it to our organization. Notice that the name automatically includes the publisher prefix and generates the name based on the folder structure for the file. We can choose to update the display name, specify whether the web resource should be customizable, or enter in a description as well. I'll go ahead and leave those for now. You'll notice that there's also a pre-published settings tab. Here we have the option of specifying a different location which XRM Toolkit can use to get the content of the file when publishing to Dynamics 365. This is helpful if you have, say, a gulp or a grunt process that runs on the file that outputs the final content to a different folder. Maybe you minimize the content or you combine several files into a single file. This option can be used for those types of scenarios. You can see below that you can also specify a gulp task name that can be run before publishing. Using this setting, XRM Toolkit will automatically run the specified gulp task before publishing the contents to Dynamics 365. Note that in the instance where you have a TypeScript file that is linked, XRM Toolkit automatically knows to publish the transpiled JavaScript version, which it assumes is in the same folder as the TypeScript file. I don't have any special handling of this particular file, and so I'll go ahead and leave those options the way that they currently are, and press the Create button. XRM Toolkit is now creating the web resource in Dynamics 365, as well as adding the file to the active solution that was specified during the linking process. Now that it's linked, we get all the same options for the file as we did with the other files. When we went through the linking process for the entire solution, we purposefully prevented one of the files from being linked. We could go through that process again, and it would pick up that file to link to the existing asset, but I'd like to demonstrate how to manually link that file. We'll go ahead and select the Add/Link option for the file. This time I'll select the option to link it to an existing item. XRM Toolkit now loads all the existing resources that are of the same type, which in our case is a JavaScript file, and then displays them in a list. Notice the solution dropdown, which filters the results based on the solution that is currently selected. In this case, our existing resource is not shown in the list because it hasn't been added to our solution yet. So I'm going to go ahead and select the default solution so that we can find the resource that we're looking for. After all the resources load, you'll notice that XRM Toolkit was able to find the one that we want. Now, just above the selected item, you can see that several of the items are grayed out and we can't select those. That's because those items are already linked to another file in our solution. If we really wanted to link this file to one of those, we would check the option to allow linking to already linked assets. Notice that we now have the ability to select one of those. Another option I want to point out is the action to perform upon linking. We can either publish what we currently have locally to our organization, download what is currently in Dynamics 365, and overwrite our local file, or by default, just do nothing. We'll leave the default and hit the Next button. On the next page, it displays all the properties for that item as it currently exists in Dynamics 365. Notice that all the fields are disabled so that we aren't able to change anything. That's because we chose the action to do nothing upon linking. If we had chosen to publish our local contents to Dynamics 365, then we would have the ability to update some of the properties here, which would get updated once we finished the process. We'll go ahead and press the Link button, which will complete the process of linking this item. So I just showed you how easy it is to take an existing solution and link everything with XRM Toolkit so that you can start using all of the awesome functionality that XRM Toolkit brings. As always, if you thought this video was helpful, please like and subscribe. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.